Hi everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Special guest in the house is Margaret Brennan, host, moderator, Face the Nation. How are you?
Good. Nice to be with you.
It's great to meet you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good to be here in New York.
So before we talk about the show and the crazy world we live in, I want to talk about your life. You grew up in Connecticut, not too far from where I grew up. Take me back to Margaret as a young girl, your interests, your influences. How did you decide to get involved in this crazy business?
Oh, wow. It was actually my mom who prompted me to take a look at news. But I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. I went to school in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I always had an interest in what was happening in the world, particularly, conflict, the Middle East. And I knew when I went to university that's what I wanted to study.
Right.
But just growing up, I was just fascinated by what was happening in the world, either through the television set or through the New York Times on Sunday morning, reading it as a kid. And it always piqued my interest, but I thought I was going to go actually into diplomacy. I didn't know I was going to become a journalist until I was in my third year at University of Virginia. And I figured out I didn't want to be, speaking for anyone other than, what I was seeing myself. After having come back from studying abroad in Jordan, I realized that first-person experience really made a difference for me. You
mentioned Jordan. What was the most interesting part of that experience for you?
That was incredible. I was a foreign affairs, Middle East studies double major, and I minored in Arabic. And I just came back with such respect for anyone who really puts themselves outside their comfort zone and trying to learn another language. That kind of immersion, it is so humbling, it is so overwhelming, it is so good. I think character building, I'll make my son do it someday, but also fabulous to get out of the classroom and see the part of the world that I had studied for so long. So it really did change the trajectory of my life by having me have that first person experience, try to communicate with people, try to understand what was happening instead of just reading about it.
And especially at that point in your life as a college student in Virginia, to make you extremely uncomfortable and put you in Jordan, complete opposite situation.
Totally different than Charlottesville, Virginia.
What a great perspective for you at that point in your life. And it's incredible how that shapes things for many years to come. And at that point in your life, I'm sure you're thinking this would be a great opportunity, but you may not necessarily realize at that point that it's going to shape many years of your life after that.
That's right. And this reveals my age, but this was pre-9/11. And so I was interested in the Middle East and the language before it was viewed as necessarily an asset.
Right, and that's probably a small percentage of people at that time.
It was.
Especially as a college student, too.
Absolutely. I mean, we were in a small department at University of Virginia that then, after 9/11, of course, government funding came pouring in. But at that period of time, it was much more in vogue still, after the fall of the Soviet Union, to study Russian. And there was a lot of catch-up. I think you saw, academically and elsewhere, the catch-up that needed to happen to have people learn Arabic and Farsi and all the languages of the region.
So learning Arabic must have been a beast. What was the toughest thing in doing that?
It was. I wish I were as good as when I was there as a student.
I mean, I can't blame you at this point.
It's, I loved it and I was passionate about it, which makes a difference when you're trying to learn a language. It was also interesting to me to learn a totally different alphabet. Read right to left, learn the script, which I think is beautiful. And that made a difference, just even turning the switch in my mind of sort of starting from zero. This wasn't, English and Spanish and French are so similar, they have similar roots. Sometimes
Arabic,
you can
totally different.
And I had some great professors, and the opportunity to go abroad made a big difference too.
That's awesome. So you've had the foreign affairs piece, and then the financial piece also came in there with the CNBC experience, the Bloomberg experience. What did you learn about the financial markets, and what was most surprising during that time, just in terms of immersing yourself in that world?
It was an incredible education. I'm so glad I did it. I didn't know at the time I would be in the least bit interested when I was graduating from UVA in the financial markets. I grew up with my dad commuting to Wall Street every day of my life, working in finance and analysis, and so it was vaguely familiar to me. But I knew it wasn't my passion necessarily to be crunching numbers or work on Wall Street. I looked at those options and I knew I had to follow my passion. But the opportunity came about at CNBC because there was an anchor who had been a Middle East correspondent who transitioned to financial news and thought that I had sort of some of the assets he thought he was looking for in terms of probably just being young and eager and willing to learn. And I learned on the job, not only television, but started learning more about the markets, and at a tremendous point, I had this great excuse to talk to literally the smartest, most successful financial minds in the entire world because they were coming on his show, and I had to pre-interview them.
Right.
So it was like I went from knowing absolutely nothing to getting. It's actually probably embarrassing if you look back at the questions I asked them. They were very kind to sit and answer.
Yeah, but you're a curious
ones.
person also.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. One of the things that I think people misunderstand or when they hear, oh, finance money, it's boring. It touches absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
Economics touches absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Political decisions, social change, all of it. And so when you start connecting those dots and seeing the pieces fit together, it's fascinating. And that's what I found. And that's why I stayed in that business for 10 years, through the financial crisis, through the European debt crisis, and I think now even it's an asset to me.
Yeah, I think it definitely is an asset. And it feels like this is the perfect show to kind of bring the financial piece, the foreign affairs piece, and just your journalistic background as well. So it's been a year of hosting Face the Nation. When you think about the past year of your life, what has it been like, and what has been the most fascinating part of it?
It was a hell of a year, because I also had a baby.
You became a mother as well.
I became a mother.
How did you balance the two of those things? What was life like?
I'm still balancing, I'm still juggling, and I think I just have so much more respect for working parents and certainly working moms going through this myself. Because it is just a constant juggling act. And this is an intense job at a really intense period of time news-wise. So I'm still figuring it out. But I've had a great team supporting me, and I still have that excuse of being able to talk to the smartest people out there by picking up the phone to brief me. And going into this political season, I think it's interesting because so many people who have watched Washington for decades were blown away by what happened in 2016 and kind of had to start from zero in many ways.
Right.
We're still trying to figure out what the calculus is on Capitol Hill because Republicans aren't acting like Republicans and Democrats are trying to figure out who they are now. So I think having a fresh set of eyes is actually a really good thing. Not just for the Trump presidency, but understanding the dynamics or trying to understand the dynamics of the change that we're seeing.
I think it's a great thing, and it's a necessary thing too. And we were talking before off camera with your interview with President Trump. You went about it in a very specific way, and you kept him focused, and you asked very specific questions. But you've been in the room with him, you've been in the Oval Office with him. What were the biggest challenges of that interview for you?
Well, I had also traveled with the president when I was a White House correspondent. I traveled with the previous president as well. And you start to, when you cover someone day in, day out, you start observing their habits or how they respond and when they respond well versus when they don't. So that's an education. All of that was an education to sitting down with him. I think in terms of some of the surprises, it was a long time since the president had sat down with a Sunday show anchor, with a network anchor. He doesn't do it as often. We see him on TV a lot, but it's often on cable or it's in photo sprays, and it's just a different give and take. And I was pleased with how generous he was with his time. We ended up getting about 45 minutes. It wasn't supposed to be that long. But he was really engaged on a number of issues that he often doesn't get to talk about. We hear from him in sound bites. And tweets, but that number of characters in those sound bites don't really add up to a bigger picture.
And these are such complex issues also.
Exactly, which is why you have to sit and have an extended conversation. I mean, that is the value, I think, and the importance of having a platform like Face the Nation, because we can have these extended conversations, whether it's with the president or a senator. You need more than just a 3-minute segment. Right,
and you need to know all the information to be able to sift through the lies.
Sift through the spin is always the challenge, and really I think it is like cramming for an exam on that, because you have to know the issues and know where you're going to jump in a conversation, and we try to be very just fact-based, very contextualized in the kind of work that we do. So it was a lot of prep work.
And also just to listen, because you never know what the person is going to say.
Yes.
And sitting in this chair, I'm thinking about my next question sometimes, and sometimes I miss things from the guest.
Right.
But balancing the two of those things allows for it to be great TV and for great information to get out there.
Well, it's hours logged in the cockpit too, as an anchor once said to me. But everything's an education for the moment that you are coming upon. And having covered Wall Street for as long as I did, I mean, I hosted a 2-hour live show from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange every day. So like chaos around me,
right. Great experience.
It was good experience to kind of be able to just say, no, I'm going to focus here and block that out. So, it's all new in many respects, but some of the skills I think I helped cut my teeth on have come into play here. Still, obviously, so much more to learn.
Definitely. So you said it, this year has been pretty crazy. Obviously, going into 2020, things will be pretty wild too. So just from a journalistic perspective, what excites you the most about Donald Trump running again in 2020 and who the Democrats will roll out there?
Well, I think there was such interest that was spiked after the 2016 election. It's certainly interest in the news cycle. We saw that hold on. I think some people are a little fatigued by the almost, combat we've been in politically, it feels like. So I'm interested in, are people going to be enthused and motivated like they were in the midterm races and where we saw this record turnout? Are they going to do that in 2020? Are they going to be hungry for information and specifics? Are we going to instead then respond to sort of the celebrity characters on both sides who are running? What is it? I think there's a really important conversation to be had about what we expect out of American presidents and what we expect out of ourselves these days. I haven't heard a lot of that articulated from any of the Democratic candidates in terms of what America's role in the world needs to be, should be, what do we want it to be. There's a lot of conversation that we need to have as well about what defines us being American. You hear more about that around the immigration debate. I think President Trump, as any incumbent president, has the advantage of the so-called bully pulpit. He commands an audience no matter where he is. And so any candidate running against him has to, be able to respond at any moment to the unconventional president, but also provide a real alternative. And the race is so crowded right now on the Democratic side, it's only going to get more crowded. And so that's going to be, it's going to be our responsibility to help viewers, help voters sort through that. What differentiates? Unpack it. What differentiates people? It's fascinating. Bernie Sanders just got into this race. He won essentially in terms of changing the Democratic platform to go more progressive, because you're seeing Democratic candidates, which he in name is not a Democrat, adopt many of his policies. So what does that mean now that he's in? Does that take up that space on the left? Does that force farther left? When are the centrists going to jump in? How are we going to see the Democrats define themselves in 2020? I think that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Absolutely, and just not thinking about only party, but just focusing on the issues. And even when people are voting, not just thinking party. Because like you said, Bernie Sanders, an ideology, not a Democrat. Donald Trump, an ideology, certainly is not what a Republican has been in the past. And where you can come in is teaching people what's going on and questioning the people who are going to be making the decisions. That's ultimately what needs to happen over the next year plus with people like you and people all across the country.
It's ironic because we talk about the tribalism of people going to their corners and defining themselves as Republicans or Democrats. Republicans and Democrats can't define themselves right now. So it's an interesting sort of quick hot take impulse that all of us have right now as an electorate that I don't necessarily think is the healthiest for us.
I agree. And Margaret, lastly, when people check out your show every Sunday, you want to teach them, educate them, but what do you want them to get across thinking once the show's over?
I want people to walk away saying I learned something, or they're thinking about something in a slightly more nuanced way, or give them something to sort of chew on when they walk away, because I think you are inundated by opinion right now everywhere you turn. You're inundated by constant headlines, incremental often, and feeling like they can come to us, even if so many people say to me, oh, I can't watch the news right now. Just knowing you can come to one place and feel like you're going to have a civil conversation on a Sunday morning. And, it can get contentious, it can get heated, but we're not just going to stage that food fight for you. We want you to learn something at the end of it.
Well, you do a great job with it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You guys can catch Face the Nation Sundays on CBS. See you next time here on the Sit Down.